Hey everyone, welcome to the Pawareness podcast, and thanks for joining me. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, and also check us out at pawareness.org and on Instagram at pawareness_official. On Instagram, we are doing submissions for Pet of the Week, where you can submit your foster pet, and we'll pick one winner every month, and we'll give $200 to their choice of charity or foster. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Pawareness podcast. Today I have Shelby Baden with the Traveling Dogtor, and I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I actually just graduated from the University of Georgia College of Veterinary Medicine. During my first year of veterinary school, I started the Traveling Dogtor social media platform / blog, where I kind of gave advice to my peers about how to cope with mental, like anxiety and stress, and promoting positive mental health practices to my community. Also helping vet students just in general, like get into vet school. It's been really fun. And then where I'm going is I actually just took a job as an emergency vet in Tampa, Florida. So I'll be actually practicing veterinary medicine in the next few months here. So
Congratulations on the job offer. I'm sure that's got to be really exciting, and love the Tampa area, great area. So seriously, congratulations on that. And I wanted to ask you too, I know that you said that you started this during vet school. So when exactly was that? And what was your mindset like when you were creating that? What was that like?
So basically, I started this during my first year. I wrote my first blog post in December of my first year of vet school. And I really don't know what happened. I just sat down and started typing, and I was like, I need to publish this somewhere. I took 4 years off in between undergrad and vet school, and I had all of this experience, life experience, that I wanted to share with people. And so I basically started the Instagram account to promote the blog. And it kind of, turned into this different thing than I ever expected it to be. It really grew. At first, I was just wanting to help solely vet students gain experience and get in to vet school, because it's pretty competitive and it's really stressful. But what I found is I had a lot more to offer in terms of mental health than I did just getting into vet school, especially as I grew through my career. I guess that's kind of how it started. And it's just kind of grown into something bigger than I ever anticipated it to be.
Now, I know that you mentioned, mental health. What are some things that you're seeing in the community that you're helping people with? And what's that like for someone who's completely new that may not know the mental health state of vet students or the professionals?
Yeah, so basically, veterinarians we're basically in the mental health crisis right now. So a recent study came out that said they looked back at like people in veterinary medicine and the rates of suicide, and found female veterinarians are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population. Male vets were twice as likely. So there's been a huge emphasis on mental health in our community and just talking about it. A lot of the vet schools have actually gotten on board with this too, but it's even like right before I got to University of Georgia, a student had committed suicide. And so my college started implementing Wellness Wednesdays, where we didn't go in until 1 p.m. They started having yoga classes and things to kind of decrease our stress load. But yeah, it's a really tough job. And I think people think it's just playing with puppies and kittens all day. And in reality, it's really difficult. You're kind of always balancing life and death based off of how much money people have, which is hugely traumatic at times. Also, just the ability to euthanize things, it really takes a toll. People typically get into veterinary medicine because they love animals, right? And so if you're euthanizing things every day, it can really like be detrimental to your mental health.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like, the vet field attracts animal lovers and, extra that are more empathetic towards animals. And yet you guys are seeing probably some of the hardest situations. And so, I can't even imagine what that feels like. And what are some things that you do or that you recommend people to do when they're going through these hard times, these kind of like crisis states they see these animals? Is there anything that you do, like a routine or something that you like doing that kind of helps counteract that stress?
Yeah. Going back, I experienced a huge trauma when I was in my last year of high school, and I lost my dad. And it felt like for me at that moment, it was like, I had to make a choice of how I was going to live the rest of my life. If I was going to let this impact me forever, or if I was going to, use it as kind of a growth opportunity, a learning opportunity. Like, I can survive. If I can survive this, I can survive anything. And over, I would say like probably the 4 years following, I started to kind of incorporate these tools into like my toolbox of coping. So my personal development practice includes journaling, which was kind of the first thing I did after I experienced that trauma, as I started writing about it. And then also yoga. Yoga is something that a lot of people come to after they experience trauma. And it is like one of those things where you kind of are forced to meditate and forced to find stillness within yourself. And it's been really powerful in my life. And then meditation, for sure, has been really good. And I think the thing that I'm most consistent with is just reading and like constantly learning about personal development and about, mental health and about spirituality. So those are kind of the things I typically recommend to people when they are having kind of these crisis moments, is like pick one and start there, and you can add on later. But it really is about starting small and adding a new like habit in increments in order to see the change that happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting you point that out. And I think this is good too for people that aren't even in the vet or medical field to practice, because we all have stresses in our daily life. And I was watching, there's this one channel called Gaia, and there was this healing video, and it was talking about how like the stress levels, well, it's kind of like when, in primal days when we were running away from a saber-toothed tiger, it took all of our energy, and that was taking away energy from our pancreas, our liver, all of these things. And so if we can mitigate that stress, it's going to take us out of that fight or flight stage and overall just make us healthier. Now, I know that's like a little, away from Western medicine, but I think it can be somewhat true. And I think people should practice the meditation, the journaling, the yoga, and just get that stillness in yourself. I think that's such good advice that you're recommending there. And
yeah, if I could just add one thing, is that going back to what you said about this like primal state we had, our anxiety serves a purpose, right? Like our anxiety had a purpose to run away from predators back in the day. So we could see what was causing the anxiety, and when that fear was done and over, our brains were like, okay, that's over, we can rest now. Whereas people who experience anxiety, it's like there's no external trigger necessarily. Like there's nothing chasing you, there's nothing directly affecting your life at that moment. It's all happening within you. So there's no trigger for your brain to say, okay, like it's over now, so your brain just keeps building. There's nothing to say you can stop, you're safe. So that's a really big struggle for people, is like, there's nothing to say you're okay now. So there's a ton of techniques and ways you can kind of create that within yourself. But I think that having these like personal development practices, and when you're okay, when you're sitting, you're using, meditation or whatever to calm yourself down, that's really powerful because there's nothing externally that says, okay, you're safe, you can calm down.
Exactly. And I know that you mentioned before the call that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what is that like? And, you're probably embedded in that community. What is that like? And how do you promote mental health awareness?
Yeah, so I talk about my own mental health struggles on my social media platforms and in my blog. I'm pretty open and vulnerable about it, because I think people think that they're all alone. Like whatever they've been through, maybe they don't think they're the only one who's ever been through that, but sometimes it feels like no one is there for you. Maybe you don't have a good support system. Maybe you feel like no one can relate to you. Maybe you feel like you shouldn't be having these emotions and these feelings, but you are. And that's okay. Like that's totally normal. There's tons of times where I feel super anxious and there's nothing wrong, in my life. So I think that having the conversations is kind of, what my platform is all about. It's like, okay, this is a difficult conversation. This is something that people don't typically talk about, right? But we're talking about it. And, there's the happy stuff like, oh, here's stuff, for kittens and puppies and whatever. And that's great. And that serves a purpose. But at the end of the day, it's like, how do we talk about these things and make them more acceptable?
Yeah. And I know personally for me too, sometimes when you're going through things, it just feels like you're alone or like no one else has gone through this. And then, you just kind of dig online and you realize, wow, there are tons of people everywhere going through this exact same thing. And what has been that feedback for you, right? What has been like, do people approach you and and they're like, wow, you really helped me. Is that like a thing? Do people reach out to you often about that? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So yes, that has happened to me where people have reached out to me and, told me that I've impacted their life in some way, or asked me for advice or, it's really beautiful to see that happen. I see it happen a lot on social media. That's the best part about social media is like this community that's there to support you and you're there to support them. And that's kind of like, why people don't realize social media is very difficult. It's very hard to stay consistent. It's very hard to put your life out there for other people to see. And for me, it's like if I impact one person, then it was worth it. And I definitely feel that pretty consistently that, by sharing my message and my struggles and the ways I've dealt and coped with things that I have impacted people, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah. And I think everyone has a story to tell. And for you, for example, there's probably people you've impacted that you don't even know that they've just never reached out, and you just never know who's listening. And I think there's so many advantages to just being vulnerable and just genuine. And I think I personally am trying to work on that myself. So I think it's brave to put yourself out there and people can say all of these crazy things and you just have to just keep going. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey through vet school, and trying to balance everything has been really tough, but it's definitely so worth it.
And that's something I wanted to ask you too, is I know that when you started this, you were in vet school. What are the plans? Like now that you're working and you have a job in Tampa, are you still going to continue this?
Yeah. So I have a business partner now. Her name is Nicole. And she kind of runs all the behind the scenes stuff. And it's been really amazing to have that support. And so we're planning a bunch of things for the future, different campaigns that we have talked about and are making a reality. And definitely talking about my life post grad, because it will be a huge adjustment. The transition from student to doctor is something that I feel is kind of talked about, but not really talked about. As a student, you're kind of in this bubble and you're protected. the decisions aren't really your own. You have an input, but you're not, at the end of the day, you're not like the boss, right? So as a doctor, that all changes, and lives are literally in your hands, and you have to be able to make decisions. I recently published a blog post about what my biggest fear is upon graduation. And that's, making a decision that negatively impacts the lives of one of my patients. And that's a real fear that people have. It's hard, it's hard to be a doctor, and to, I guess that first year is just constant learning and constantly growing, right? But yeah, so I think that my platform is going to kind of change from focus on like students and studying and, balancing school with everything else to, okay, now I'm a doctor. How am I coping with these challenges?
I think that's awesome that it's your journey, and it's now people get to see, okay, this is what we've been following you all this time for. Now you are a professional. Now you are in, a vet doing this, right now. I think that's so cool. And maybe what advice do you have for someone that is maybe considering going into vet school, or maybe they're already in vet school? What one piece of advice would you have for them? Or maybe if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing, kind of a big question, but what would that be?
Well, if I could go back in time, I would say grades don't matter unless you want to specialize. But if you are thinking about it, then it's important to have good grades. But that's like something, kind of a vet student specific type of thing. But the biggest piece of advice I can offer people, especially if they're looking for jobs following graduation, or if they're just interested in veterinary medicine in general, is to find good mentors, people who love being a vet, especially if you're like just considering going to vet school. Like, find someone who loves being a vet, who's not going to tell you not to go. Because if it's your passion, it's what you want to do, you don't want to be discouraged from that. But once you're in vet school, find those mentors, find those relationships, and then, really like put a good amount of energy and time into maintaining those relationships. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you go, you're going to need a recommendation for a job. You're going to need advice about, what is a good job? Like, where am I going to be supported and taken care of as I transition into being a doctor? I've had like the most positive experiences with my mentors, and fostering those relationships, and things that I could have never anticipated happened because I put the time and the energy into maintaining those relationships. It really is so rewarding when you have someone that can serve as a good role model for you in the industry, and they can definitely help you in those times where you are struggling, whether it be in school or after school. Those connections are so important.
Yeah. And I want to say too, I want to kind of add to that. I think that's for any career path, anything you're doing. If you can find a good mentor, someone that genuinely cares, and like you said, put the energy towards that relationship, it's going to be the best investment you've ever made. So could not echo that any better. And where can people find you at, follow your content, reach out to you? Where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's traveling_doctor, and traveling has one L. So that's like kind of the main platform I use. And then my blog is travelingdoctor.com. And so you can find me there. I'm on Facebook, Traveling Doctor, and then TikTok also. TikTok actually is, this crazy platform that I kind of love. Definitely like my weird kitten and puppy videos get like the most views, but I have a lot of good information on there for people in vet school, for people looking to start a yoga practice, what books I recommend as far as personal development wise, tips for clinics, tips for new puppy and kitten owners. Like, I have everything on TikTok pretty much. just in short little videos. So yeah.
I think that's awesome. And yeah, you got to feed the TikTok algorithm with the weird cat and dog videos.
Yeah,
you got to.
I know my most popular video is one of my foster kittens crawling on top of my dog Apollo. And I'm like, it's so weird. It's like 8 seconds of just like madness. But anyway, people on TikTok, I love it too. Like my TikTok feed is just random cat videos, basically.
I need to follow you on TikTok then. So just my cup of tea. Yeah. And I'll have all of your socials I will have in the link below. No matter where you're watching, check it out. Look forward to following your journey. And thanks for coming on at this it's kind of a cool time to have you on in between, just finish up vet school, getting ready to start. So definitely look forward to talking again. And it was great having you on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.